Heyo, Chris, Legion of Games, your Kickstarter guru information center of all that you need to know that is coming on crowdfunding, Kickstarter, GameFound, Backer Kit, whatever it may be in the future. One stop shop. The most complete roundup that you will see on a weekly basis. If you're new, join in. If you're not new, thanks for watching again. I don't have a whole lot of preamble this week. It's a short week, thankfully, but we got some very interesting things to lead off with Simon's latest. As always, subscribe. Hit a comment down below after I've said something interesting. Hit the thumb. Let's go right into it, folks. Let's do this. So here it is, right? This is Simon's latest. And usually by this time, we're looking at Simon being 7 figures large. But here, just over $250,000. Now, why is that? Well, I'm not really sure yet, to be very frank with you, because there's a lot of speculation. There's a lot of peanut gallery down here in the comment section, but I'm going to stay away from that a little bit. You can argue that it's Marvel zombie side reaction. It's, in relationship to the shipping side of things, whatever you want. But also, Cyberpunk 2077 doesn't have the best track record from a video game side of things. There was a lot of divisiveness when that came out to consoles and PCs. And are people sort of feeling it that way? Because this is another in the latest iteration. If you've not heard me shout it from the rooftops, video game ports to the tabletop. Right? Another one. Because there's cash. You don't have to come up with a theme. You can take and build mechanics, or hopefully not, build the theme around the mechanics around the theme. One of those is good. One of those is much less good. Here is what you need to know, though. This is Simon's latest take on the area control game. This is just that, only it's miniature heavy. Now, we're very early in the campaign. I'm filming this less than 48 hours into the campaign, and so it's got 13 days. Is this going to be a Blood Rage Dog of War, or is this going to be an Ankh Rising Sun sort of situation? Actually, just more of an Ankh situation, right? Because Blood Rage, very few. Dog of War, very few expansions. Ankh, not so much. All of the other latest iterations, non-area control from Simon, lots of expansions. So we'll see. I have no idea. I would hope that less is more in this situation, but I'm a little bit dashed already when we get down to this, the exclusive V Edge Runners, if you will. We'll talk about that box here in a second, but they have your basic map, your basic area control map with, I believe, 6 areas that you're going to be vying for dominance in. And I use that term very specifically because that's the term they actually use as the person controlling one of those areas. And you have a place of interest in each one of those areas that will give you special bonuses or allow you to get essentially better resource gathering actions, whatever it may be, when you use one of your said 6 action discs that you have available to you at any given time. Now, not just 6 action discs in general, but 6 action discs that are going to be very specific. Each one does a different action. One of those action discs is a wild. Now, they give you the basic setup on the actual page. It's not bad, but it's the, top-down view. If you want to go down a little bit lower, you can actually check out the rulebook. Spoilers there, they try to stay true to the Cyberpunk 2077 mythology, thematic incorporation, whatever you want to call it in the rulebook. So there's a lot of just very specific terminology that you're going to have to go back and forth of and sort of get into your head ingrained when you're reading through it. They talk about this, and this is very unclear in the rulebook, and it really needs a further explanation. You have this story mode that is going to potentially change the objectives, change the rules, change the end game. They say there's even like a little bit of an epilogue scenario where you're putting these cards out, and you start off with a tutorial scenario. So it's just your basic first game. It doesn't change any of the rules, it says, but that's sort of the groundwork, the basement of the game. You choose one of, I'm assuming there will be more factions here, 4 asymmetric factions. Now, I say that very loosely. The same actions are to be taken by all of these factions, but they're all going to have 2 abilities, I think Revenge and Payback, that are going to be different along those lines. But the other 6 actions that I already mentioned, exactly the same. Activating your units. Well, this is where they start to make a little bit of the nuance with the actions themselves, because most of them have two separate parts that you're going to be doing, including firefights, which are the battles, or going back to those points of interest, allowing you to interact, allowing you to move only one type of unit, because you're going to have three essential types of units that you're going to be looking at on a turn-by-turn basis. And when you play that action tile, you get to move all units of that type, no matter where they are on the board. Now, the edge runners are the X Factor. These are the characters that you can hire, but you can only hire 3 in a game. There are 3 types of these said edge runners, but there is also a 4th that doesn't really fall under any category, that is more of a special one, if you will. Street cred is victory points. So that's essentially what you're doing. You're playing up to a set amount, potentially, depending on those story-driven quest things that I mentioned up above, that could also change the end game depending on where it or how it changes it in the first place. One pledge level, $110. They give you the basics here. They tell you a little bit of what you're going to be doing here. You can see that each of them have the 3 different types that I was mentioning: the techie, the solo, and the net runner. And that's the basic gist of it. Now, here are the edge runners that are included in the base game. As I mentioned, you're only hiring 3 per game. So you can see here there's 5, 8, there's 10. So if you play a 4-player game, how can you all hire 3 of them if you only have 10 of them? Don't think about that one too hard, because if you're getting any of the pledge levels here, you'll notice that here are all of the edge runners down here that are all apparently exclusive. So there's another 11, 15, 19, 20 so far. So you've got 30. So there's some variety, but as with all of CMON's things like this, how unique are they? How different are they? And the rulebook has like 2 examples of what they are. So it doesn't give you a good sense of how different or anything about the non-solo techie netrunner ones, if that makes sense. The other aspect of things that is kind of weird is they're including a single player variant down here as an exclusive. Like, if you want to play solo, you better get it now, because otherwise we're not going to support it. Like, really? Come on. That's not very good. Here's the rulebook that I was mentioning. We'll talk about some more details in a second. Quackalope did a paid video here, so you can check that out if you want. But beware, it's a tabletop simulator, tabletop arena, whatever, one of the digital ones. So if you're like me and you have trouble following along and, really watching those, I would suggest you read the rulebook at the same time. But I'll say the rulebook is very rough. I get a general gist of what it is exactly, but it's also framed sort of a weird way. So the dynamics and the interconnections of these actions are a little bit difficult to explain. You're going to hit your stretch goals here. You're going to have all of this. I mean, do you really need more edge runners? That's really the question, because that's really the only variability that they're giving you here. So far, at least. I would wager you're going to have a 5th player expansion, and you're going to have something else that's going to modify it up potentially before the end of the campaign, but it's only a 14-day campaign, so I wouldn't expect too much. Probably some deluxified bling add-ons, if you will, as well. So I'm sure you'll see a bunch of that, but, they've already sort of keeping the stretch goals a little bit closer together, a little bit spaced out. Does this thing taper off, and do they switch to daily unlocks? Because you'll see here there are no unlocks. Where are the expectations? Because with the last several CMON campaigns, they have had the daily unlocks because of the whole Trudvang fiasco that happened a couple years ago. Gosh, I hope that wasn't a couple years ago. You know what I'm saying, though. We'll pull up the rulebook here for a second, just so you have a hot minute of what else you need to know. Now, there are going to be different sided boards depending on the player count that they mention right here in the very small text. You can't read that, but believe me, it's there. Then they run through actually all of the unit rules, including drones, which are drones, right? They count as presence, but they can be by themselves, but then sometimes they can't be by themselves, losing units versus getting them removed from the game, all of that sort of thing. Now, this is the big take-home message that I think you have to look into if you're looking at this game as an area control game. It does not matter how many units you have in the area. It doesn't. It does not. So it's not, I have more units than you. It is based on these combat cards. You play a combat card. These combat cards, if you go down to the example right down here in a second, they have guns on them. I'll blow it up here for you. See, look, 4 guns, 3 guns, 2 guns. This one wins. This one loses. This one loses. That's it. then the abilities go off. This one nullifies these other two abilities, so that's basically the whole battle. So the battles are streamlined, but the battles are totally card dependent. The other thing about these cards is you'll notice that this one in specific is noticed a starting card from that aspect. You start out with 4 of these cards, and that's the other nuance of this game, is part of them is buying these combat cards. So what you do is you only ever have 4 of them. You buy a new one, you discard an old one. So you're upgrading, trying to go along with your strategy. So that's really where the nuance is. How do you feel about that, knowing it, that the fights are not how many I have in there? It's not Risk, it's not Ankh, it's not Blood Rage, it's, do you have presence there or not? The other aspect with the fights is, and we'll pull this back out here a second if I can actually do this, we'll pull it up here to this example right here. If you are in the area and a fight starts, you have to fight. You are involved in the fight. It doesn't matter if you want to, it doesn't matter if you don't want to. If you are in the area, period, you are involved in the fight. So that's another aspect of how do you feel about it in the first place. They talk about the opportunity cards here next. Those are basically your quests or your objectives that if you complete them, they give you additional bonuses. And then they talk about how, you're building hideouts, and those are how you get presence in other areas, because sometimes you'll either gather resources from where your hideouts are or place a guy down at where all your hideouts are. You have a limited number of hideouts. But the active thing about the hideouts is that you do not have to have presence in an area in order to place a hideout. So if you want to place a base essentially anywhere on the map, if you take this action, you can. So it's a little bit different dynamic when we're playing people on a map style of game, where typically you have to have presence to build presence, right? I'm looking at one of my favorite games of all time, Spirit Island, my favorite game of all time. I don't even want to say one of my favorites, but that's what you're doing in this game. And these are going to earn you the infamy, the street cred, as I said earlier, of the 25 points. They run through the different types of actions. And the last thing that you need to know is one of your actions, non-action actions, is reclaiming. So as you're spending these tokens, you're going to have less and less options of what you can do and who you can move and the actions, because you have only these 6 and you only have these specific 6 because these tokens only do the thing that they do. But reclaiming them allows you to gather resources, recruit said units that I just mentioned to areas like hideouts, and then gain all of them back. Sort of a deck builder where you're playing your cards, and then picking them all up back in your hand, right? That's the mechanic they're using, only as an area control style mechanism. So that's the rule book side of things that you need to know. Shipping, it's gonna be what it's gonna be. They're quoting already $60 for North America, at least. So I don't really know how this ties in. I would imagine that maybe they're putting the over on this one as opposed to the under that they've done several times in the past, a lot of the time in the past. And then people have been upset about it being more. Whereas maybe you're setting the bar this high, and then if it's under, people are like, oh yeah, that's great. But this is probably shipping and freight included. So take it for what you will, but you're paying essentially half the price of the game. Even the base pledge essentially could cost you $200 for this game so far. And is this worth $200 to you? Without any add-ons, without any expansions, with just variations of characters that you're never going to be able to have more than 3 of in a game regardless. So how do you feel about that? That is Cyberpunk 2077. Everything I know that you need to know, and a little bit of everything else. Next up from Lobby Games, about 50% funded. This is Stardust Coffee. I talked about this last week. This is a resource and dice management game. You're making the best cup of coffee because now Stardust is an ingredient that you can use to make coffee anywhere in the galaxy better. Now you can see the basic setup of the board here, and you're going to be placing these 3 different types of ingredient tiles around the outside, and you're going to be sort of navigating your way around them, placing down resources, gathering them up, and then collecting them into your ship while trying to avoid the space pirates in the first place, because the space pirates will not only cause you to lose resources, but they will get in your way of being able to fulfill the main thing that you need to do in terms of this sort of pick up and deliver, as well of creating the coffee in the first place that you need to bring to get victory points. So it's looking like a little bit of a roundel-esque with a little bit of dice action selection. And it's an interesting combination of these recipes, as you can see here. And as you pull up the rule book, you can get a little bit better sense of what you're going to be actually doing. Here you can see a blown up picture of the board and the round marker throughout the middle. Now the round marker also is dependent and related to how many resources you lose if you end up with a pirate on your space in the first place. If it's round 3, lose 3 resources, right? So you need to avoid from that aspect. The weird thing and sort of the concerning thing, because I don't really get a good sense of how easy or not this is going to be, and the biggest barrier to entry is going to be the player turns themselves. And you'll see what I mean by that here in a second, because on your turn, you activate an action die that's going to activate one of your available spaceships. But when you do that, you get 7 actions that you can do. Now you can do them in any order, it says, but 7 actions is not a small amount. Now you can do them however you want, wherever you want, whichever starship you want to activate that turn. But that's a relatively high amount of actions to be trying to program and optimize on a single turn. And do you like the possible combinations? The factorial number of different ways you could take your actions on a single turn. 7 factorial, right? 7 times 6 times 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. You don't really need the times 1, but you know what I'm saying. Gathering your ingredients, spending them, like I mentioned, to harvest and create the coffee. Now you can upgrade as well, but how you upgrade is based on, again, the die that I mentioned that you'll be utilizing to activate said spaceship in the first place. So there's a little bit of strategy there as well, and you can see what you're doing in each one of these. I'm not going to go over all of them for you. Collecting the advanced ingredient, the Stardust, and delivering said coffee after you make it. Attacking pirates in order to not get your ingredients stolen. So how do you feel about that? There's enough little links here and enough previewers that you can get a good sense of it if you want to. It's $28 for an early bird. Now you're going to be missing out on this if you're watching this for the first time when this video airs, because it only has 34 hours left, but it's not really that much different. You just get a wooden first player token. So that's not a big deal whatsoever. And for $28, I'd say it's relatively well priced from that aspect. You can get a little bit higher level if you want all wooden tokens and Irregular Moons mini expansion. But similarly, it's just the lack of the first player token as the difference between the early bird and the not early bird, which is frankly a little bit nice. It's a little bit refreshing not to see massive differences there from that aspect. So that's Stardust Coffee. Are you interested? Yes? No? A little caffeine to perk you up in the morning? There you go. That's all I got. Next one, Alliance, the game of diplomacy in the Napoleonic era with whatever the Columbia block system twist is. I have no idea what that is. It's funded. It's $12,000. Each person is spending about $144 of these 85 people that are backing it. But if you're somebody who doesn't know what the Columbia block system twist is, well, you're kind of SOL because they don't really tell you what it is on here. They basically give you the description that it's diplomacy, but it's called Alliance. And you're going to have several different mechanisms, including what they say of treaties. Well, you know, diplomacy of trying to get alliances, backstab, do that sort of thing, up to 7 players playing the game at the same time. And you're going to have whatever they're calling the fog of war technique, which if you're not familiar with the fog of war, meaning you can see what you have, you can't see what other people have in terms of units and placements and things like that to create a little bit more of a tension. But that's it. That's the war game explanation. 2 pledge levels, one with neoprene, one without, and some of their previous games. So no rulebook, no videos, no further explanation. But, you know, I mention it because it's new this week and I'm short on material. So let's do both, right? Right. Next up, Muskoka, the board game. 200% funded. What do we got here? So this game is relatively straightforward. The rulebook is like less than 4 pages. And it's coming out from Kanazi Games. So what do you need to do? Well, there are 3 different ways of, win conditions that you needed to fulfill in order to complete the actual game. And they talk about them right here. Completing your detour, getting enough wildlife tokens, and accumulating the points that you need. You need 25 points, I believe, to actually end the game as one of the victory conditions. But you need all 3 in order to actually end it. So the completing the detour, essentially at the beginning of the game, there are decks of cards that you're going to be using and you draw 2 of them. One of them is your face up starting spot. One of them is a place on this map that you have to end up going to sometime in the game. And when you do, you flip it face up to let everyone know, hey guys, I've completed one of the 3 main objectives. Because the other 2, the points are going to be common knowledge or, table knowledge wide open, as well as earning the wildlife tokens. Now, the detour and the accumulating points and the tokens, there are little aspects that you may recognize if you read through the rulebook. The detour, going from place to place, but not only just your detour, but any place that you were going to in order to accomplish journeys to gain points. It's sort of Ticket to Ride-esque, but there are going to be ways to go across land, 4 different types, and there are going to be ways to go across lakes, 4 different types. And you have to have enough of a certain type along the way, sort of a la Ticket to Ride, in order to complete it in that sense. And then it uses sort of a little bit of Catan, if you will, if you're familiar with that, and that's where the wildlife tokens come in. If you get enough wildlife tokens, 5, that's the end game victory condition, but there is also an extra bonus. If you accumulate more than 5, you get a special Inukshuk, I'm pronouncing that correctly because it has the pronunciation in the rulebook, token, which is essentially a, longest road token in Catan, if you will, where if you have that token, you get 3 extra victory points at the end of the game if you are the one that holds on to it. So then you sum up all 3 of these together and rinse and repeat. So on your turn, there's essentially 2 phases. The first phase is just what I said. You collect those cards, you decide how you're going to use them in order to complete the journeys. You get the option of grabbing 2 cards. Then you can play a rest and relax card, which is essentially like a bonus card, a benefits card, if you will. But you may not have one of those because the only way you get those is the second phase of things. I'm holding up 3 fingers for some reason. The second phase of things, because it's number 3 here, select. But the things you can do, you can either do one of these. Complete the journey, like I said, a la Ticket to Ride. You can grab one of those R&R cards, or just maybe nothing. You sit dockside if you can't do either. So that's it. When you complete all 3 of those things, the game's over. Does that sound interesting to you? Well, you can check it out here. There's plenty of... Oh, look at that. I swear I did not look at this. Ticket to Ride, Catan. I swear I did not look at that. I promise you, I read the rulebook and got that impression as well. So I would say whoever wrote that is dead on there. If this is, whoever this is, Little Meeples. So there you go. $49. Now that's expensive for what it is. I mean, this is definitely indie, and it's definitely something that's not going to hit retail widely available. So if you want it, you need to get it now. These are probably true stretch goals because, like I said, indie, Kanazi Games. If this interests you, Muskoka, nature, wildlife, all mixed up into one. There you go. Check it out. I'm going to mention this one because I forgot to mention it last week, but I'm really sort of on the fence with this one. This is called the Extra Fabulous Experience because it's by some guy who's famous, internet famous for writing comics. And there's a lot of those people out there. But this one apparently is part of the popular network because as we go down here, you'll see that there are a lot of guests, comics, if you read comics online, that you will maybe notice and that you'll be aware of. But I'm skipping over this whole first part because, cyanide and happiness, oatmeal, all of those things. I'm skipping over it because it's about a book. All of this is a book. Now here we get finally to the game called Booty Call. Essentially, you're a ghost, you're a medium. It's a little bit of apples to apples and deduction, Murder in Hong Kong sort of combination where you draw 2 cards. You get to ask the ghost as you the player, the medium, trying to figure out which one of these 8 cards that the ghost is. And if you guess correctly, you and the ghost and the medium get a point. So you're getting a point every time you are the ghost. You're getting a point if you guess correctly of the players who's asking the question. And then you just rinse and repeat until the number of points, I guess. And it even says at the top, there's like bad words, and this is adult humor and sexy spectral score. The most hookup wins. Anyway, it's a little crass, but apparently it has a backing. Apparently people like this sort of thing. It's got almost $300,000. So I'm just wondering how much of it is game, how much of it is book, and how much of it is anything else in between. So I mentioned it. I forgot to talk about it last week. There you go as well. The Extra Fabulous Experience. Then we have, next up, we have Channel 1, semi-cooperative card-based game, over 50% funded. What is it about and what do you need to know? Now, this is a very interesting aspect because this is probably going to go unnoticed by a lot of other channels that may cover crowdfunding from that aspect, but I'm going to cover it as well here too. And this is of note because this is by Pops and Bijou Games. Now, you may not be aware of this. Their other game, Cultivate, has sort of gathered a cult following, in the sense that it's sort of out of print and unavailable, or has been until very recently, from North America. And that was their previous game, which did really relatively well on crowdfunding. But what we're talking about here is a semi-cooperative, and we'll talk about the semi-cooperative aspect here in a second, card-driven based game of semi-set collection-esque. So here is what you have in a nutshell. You have those three different types: the lead cards, the source cards. The locations are something different, but the inside scoop cards are the third different type. The locations are going to be just where they're at, essentially. So how are you actually playing? Again, no rule book, so there's a little bit of assumption going into these animations that they have here. The three different types of cards are going to be laid out in front of you, and you're going to be able to draft any one of the three that you want. So I'm assuming that then the one that you draft gets replaced. You draft up until everyone has their specific number of cards that they can get based on hand size. So I'm guessing, whatever, 7 maybe, who knows. But whatever it is, you draft one by one up until that. And so the main reason you're going to be choosing which one you want is going to affect the second phase of game, because what you're going to be doing here is you're going to have these leads, and you're going to be playing these leads down, and you're going to be then playing locations and sources, as well as inside scoops on each one of them. And you can see on the bottom of these cards, if you blow it up, there are going to be various conditions that are going to be affected or give you bonus points or not, depending on what cards are then placed below them. Now, the semi-cooperative aspect is this star rating in the middle of the board. You can see the scoring up here, because as these get closed, we'll talk about that in a second. You can see sort of by my head right now where close a lead is. You flip over the lead card right here to indicate that you're scoring it. But when you score it, if it scores for a certain number of points, like if it scores 0 or negative, because you're trying to influence not only yourself, but you can actually force other people to lose points, I believe, on the score track up here along the top, well, then the star rating might be affected. And if you ever get down to the network rating being a certain level, I think it says 1 down here below, then you all lose. No one wins. Game over. So that's the element that you have to balance, of not being too negative on other people, slamming them and knocking them down, and to take that aspect while still scoring points for yourself. But if you play any cards down in these areas, you score based on what you play. Even if it's closed, though, you can add additional cards face down right here that are going to give additional scoring bonuses based on that. There you go. That's it. That's the game. Now, this is the important aspect that I'm talking about down here. You can get Cultivate. They even say if you're US, Canada, which I was very surprised by. I might be getting a copy of this because it's gotten some relatively good review. I'm not going to talk about it too much, but check out the Board Game Geek link if you want to know a little bit more. But it's been relatively well thought of from a, sort of light filler-esque game. And you can get just that. You can get just the new game, however you want to do it from that side of things, and whatever else you want to go with it. So stretch goals, I think this is your true upgrades. I mean, this is, again, going to be a very small indie game. I did not see Cultivate anywhere on the larger mass marketer distributors or game sites. So this is probably going to be the best way you want to get it if you are outside of North America. So there you go. That is channel 1, as well as a little brief update on Cultivate. There you go. Okay, we only have 2 more games left here because it's a little bit lighter week, like I said. First up is Joey Games from Phil Walker. You may know him from like Sushi Go. If you're familiar with that game at all, you probably are. But it's only about a third of the way funded at this point. And that's because they're offering a trio of games from this new game company that they've started called Joey Games out of Australia. They've got 3 different games here featuring worms or caterpillars. I can't remember which one it is. Birds and passing food. And what do you need to know about all 3 of these games? Well, let's break it down here. Now, they only have 2 rule books of the 3 rule books, and that's the big thing with these last 2 campaigns is I really want to emphasize having a rule book. I don't need a video, but I really need a rule book to get a good sense of how a game is actually going to flow and play. And they talk about it a little bit here, the bird life, and this is really the one that doesn't have the rule book. So basically what you're going to be doing here is you're going to draft these cards, and there are 14 different sets of cards, and you're going to be taking 7 sets of cards each game, so you can have any different 7 sets that you want to combine. It's basically like a combination of gin, rummy, set collection, go fish, if you will. It's kind of the vibe I get from it. And what you do is you just have to get set collections. And you are then going to be able to use each of these cards, because as you can see at the bottom of each of these cards, they either have powers or points that are going to allow you to gain, well, points at the end, because that's what matters the most. And that's essentially what it is here. You can see how they want to play them and how you're going to get them in the 5s of a kind that you need. So that's the basic gist of the first game. No rule book, though. Pass the Party Food is sort of like between 2 castles. If you're familiar with that Stonemaier game, only this is a drafting game of food tiles where you draft 3 tiles, you take one and give one to the person on your left, one to the person on your right from a cooperative sense. And you're just trying to fill your little bingo card here of 5 columns and 4 rows. So you have 4 of each of the 5 different kinds. You have to do it before Ziggy the dog gets all the way, as you can see on this track on the left here, all the way up to the birthday cake. You're going to be moving your people, your little meeples, along that track as well, based on when you either get rows or columns to score. And so that's essentially what you're doing. You can also swap, and you can, trade with the person left and right in you, because again, it's cooperative. So very, very low overhead, but family friendly, kid friendly. And that's really the aspect that they're going for with this middle game here. The last one up here is Scribbly Gum. And this is essentially a 1 to multiplayer level game where it's basically a roll and write, where you have 8 different movement cards of various directions, and you're moving your little scribbly guy down here, and you're drawing a line connecting to the resources that you're grabbing. And you'll notice that there are 3 different types of resources that you need in order to get a set collection. And then as you set collect, that scores you points. If you want to make the game a little bit more complicated, a little bit more advanced for non-family, non-kids, there are also achievement tiles or achievements that you can do, and you can put in 3 of those, A, B, and C, I believe, in each game, and it comes with a number of them in the first place. I forget, the rule book is there, offers like something like 12 of them or so around that. That's essentially it, but it's expensive for 3 games. 90 Australian dollars, which is only $62 US, but that's still pretty expensive for 3 light games. Take it for what you will. It's impressive that it's already raised $10,000 being so light on those family style friendly games. But the $34,000 goal is pretty lofty, so we'll see if it is able to achieve that before the end of the campaign in another 18 days. Last up, Immunization. Speaking of games that do not have rulebooks, I read through this page, I looked at it extensively. I have no clue how to play this game. There's a $10,000 goal. They've got $1,800 already raised. They say that there's going to be a rulebook out. They even answered it in the comment section of when it's going to be available. But it's not being available until next week, not even the English version. And you can see all these components, and they run you through essentially what you're going to be doing, and you're creating vaccines. They're trying to stay true to the process of creating immunizations for a mass population. And you're going to be essentially going about creating your vaccines, validating them with studies, managing the production of them, and then pricing them out on the open market. And that's it for about $45. So get it earlier, get it for a slightly lower price. They talk in generalities here of how to play the game, but I don't get a good sense of, look at all these different boards that you're going to be going in between. That is a little bit worrisome, and they talk a little bit about it down here in the sense that there's unnamed expansions sort of here that you're going to be able to get with the all-in gameplay level and all of the different dice and boards and cards that you're going to be dealing with. The 4 different game modes: solo, cooperative, competitive, and short competitive. And again, they go over the steps, something like 11 steps, where you're going to be allocating dice and then making a price and then figuring out the compatibility and then using resources to purchase the parts that you need for the vaccine in the first place, doing some sort of test results based on die rolling, and then the studies of whatever you're doing here, followed by production. So it's just not very clear how these mechanisms are going together. And I mean, the illustrations are nice, but I don't get a sense of how the flow is, or what the gameplay is like, or where the strengths are, or where the weaknesses are. I don't get anything of that. Even the little quick rules here is a little bit too quick and a little bit too vague. I don't know the structure of how a turn actually plays in just the most general sense, apart from, you're getting 3 actions on the action board here, right? That's the biggest thing I can tell you, though. So they've got an uphill battle. Again, I'm not sure without any significant videos or rules. It's a tough sell nowadays. Especially, $10,000 is $10,000 for a new company. They say they're going to patent it. They say they're trying to really make it true to the science behind it. So I give them a lot of kudos for that. But ultimately, unless you have some of the stuff that the tabletop scene wants to have in the first place, science or not, it's going to be a hard sell. But that's Immunization. Check it out. So there you go. That is the roundup for this week. Also, I am this close to trying to get maybe this setup done. I've got a whole host of like wires and camera and stuff right here in front of me that I was messing with all day today. And for some reason, I can get both cameras individually hooked up to the capture card, and I can get them viewing on Streamlabs. But I cannot get, when I put in the HDMI switcher to allow me to go from feed 1 to feed 2, from camera 1 to camera 2, it is not getting a signal. And I am clueless on what to do about that. If it's a bad HDMI to HDMI cord connection, or if the power to the switcher isn't enough, even though it's plugged in the outlet. It's just, I don't know. I'm at my wit's end. I've been dealing with this now for like a couple days, and I just don't know what to do. So if any of you have any knowledge on that side of things, please let me know. I would be most appreciative, because I really want to. I have like 4 or 5 reviews that I've literally been sitting on waiting to do, because I want to be able to give you the overhead view and, you know, the back and forth view all at once, or even switch back and forth between them, and I can't do it right now, and it's driving me crazy, 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 crazy frustration. But I'm gonna try to continue to work on it. So if not, I'm just gonna have to pump out a review or two with this old crappy format, and going back and forth with some B-roll and some other stuff, and maybe a little bit of tilting the camera down and getting that. I don't know. We'll figure out something. But it's something I'm working on. And so if any of you have any expertise on that, you know, let me know in the comments, shoot me an email, whatever it may be. That's all I got. That's this week's roundup. Really light, easy, and relatively less burdensome, especially from the wallet side of things. That's all I got. Stay classy. Have a great day. Thanks for watching.